Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Finweek Money Matters, the show that helps you manage your finances. I'm Demisha Greater, and my co-hosts today are Kristia van Heerden, Finweek.com editor, and Finweek journalist Jessica Hubbard. Now, on today's show, we discuss the medical benefits of marijuana in the international community and the common mistakes entrepreneurs make every 5 years. Remember, you can read more about these stories and many others in this week's edition of Finweek that's on the shelves from today. The magazine is also available online in English and Afrikaans via mysubs.co.za. But first, let's take a look at our cover story. When it comes to terminal illnesses, there's not much that is off limits in the mind of a sufferer that is desperate enough for a cure, even substances that are considered illegal in most countries. Finweek looks at the prospects of cannabis plant, a new and growing industry in the international economy. Joining me in the studio is Jules Stobbs, who's the Director of Social Activism at Fields of Green for All. He's also known for his cannabis activism work at the Dagga Couple. And Myrtle Clark, who's the Managing Director of Fields of Green for All. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Kristia, maybe I can start with you. This is always a very controversial topic still to this day. Why did Finweek decide to embark on such an article?
Well, it started on a very personal note, and those always, I find, make for the best stories. Glenda Williams, the reporter who wrote the article, has a very personal interest here. There's illness in her family that could be very easily and very well treated with medical marijuana, and because it's not legal and it's not legally available in the country, it presents a really serious issue and a really personal issue for her family. So we started in our editorial meeting, started talking about this, and then we started thinking about the economic impact that the legalization of marijuana would have in South Africa. If you consider how much money is spent by the SAPS to avoid people using marijuana, and when you consider all the communities that could benefit from the cultivation and the sale of marijuana. And we thought it would be a really, even though it is really contentious, and I'm sure we're going to raise quite a few eyebrows, we thought it would be interesting to look at what the implications could be on a broader societal level.
Myrtle, let's bring you into the conversation now. You've heard what Kristia has to say in terms of the implications of a broader societal level. Is it safe to say that you are for the fact that they should decriminalize the use of cannabis?
Yes, and they should legalize the use of cannabis. Decriminalization is a very grey area. And also thanks to Finweek. We need all of the positive media exposure that we can get, because Fields of Green for All was named that for a particular reason, because this is Fields of Green for all South Africans. This is not just people who are sick. This is not just people who want to invest in this plant, or this is something for the broader society, as you were saying. Fields of Green for All is about the harms of prohibition, because often when it comes to the medical uses of this plant, the authorities put the cart before the horse. It's very important to remember that hundreds and hundreds of South Africans every day are incarcerated for the use of this plant, whether it just be a tiny little half a stumpy in their ashtray in their car, or whether it be a whole field of green. So one doesn't want to get ahead of ourselves in South Africa. Let's do everything in the right order. Let's look at the human rights issues surrounding this plant. Why did the police arrive at our home at 2 o'clock in the morning? Why did they give us a very, very hard time for 5 hours and then throw us in jail? Why are we still out on R1,000 bail? Why is this illegal? That's what we need to think about first, and then we can look at the benefits of it. But Fields of Green for All is about bringing the conversation to the people, and we would like to bring together everybody who is interested in this plant, and that's why we've created a non-profit company.
Jules?
Hello.
What do you have to add to that? I mean, surely you're going to have people that are going to say, how would you want to legalize something like this? I mean, what would be your response to that?
Well, ironically, the way we think of it is the only way you can regulate this plant to make sure it doesn't get into the hands of the people who shouldn't be using it is to set it free. It has to be regulated. At the moment, it's easier to get dacha than it is to get beer. And that is the crux of the matter. And as the dacha couple, South Africa's premier cannabis social activists, we don't so much go around extolling the virtues of the plant, we talk about the harms of prohibition. Because if you saw my inbox today, and you were talking on a personal level, you can't believe the strife that South Africans are going through and the victimization and the stigma that people go through just by having the cannabis plant, whether you're sick or not.
Well, we've seen the legalization of dacha in the states of Colorado and Washington in the US. What can we learn from that process that they've gone through and the effects of it thus far?
Well, one of the things that I learned immediately was when we saw the pictures on the 1st of January this year of Coloradans going to a dispensary to collect their very first legal joint, there was no new smokers. Nobody jumped up and said, right, I'm going to smoke now, it's legal. That didn't happen. So that's a very, very important thing. It's not going to open the floodgates for people to now start smoking cannabis because it's legal. That is foremost on my agenda. I think people, our detractors say, but everyone will start doing it and we're going to have some sort of zombie apocalypse. That didn't happen and it still isn't happening. But what else we can learn from Colorado is it's absolutely bogged down in legislation. And they've taxed it to death. And the black market right now, this week, it is $280 for an ounce of cannabis on the street, and it's $400 in a shop. So they've taxed themselves into stupidity here because it's still easier to go to the black market.
But what was really interesting about the Colorado case in particular is that you can't get, because it's still outlawed on a national level in the States, you can't get a bank account for, so you are, you're a legal reseller of marijuana, but you can't get a bank account, so it remains a cash business. And as my colleague Glenda said yesterday, as soon as you deal in cash businesses, you have a lot of unwanted elements.
Absolutely.
So locally, how can we do that differently?
I think that we need to look very carefully at that. And as you say, looking at the models presented by Uruguay, Washington, and Colorado. And our mantra for what we call our desired outcomes for our court case is to keep it simple. South Africa is bogged down in lots of bureaucratic hassles that open the floodgates for all sorts of corruption, all sorts of black markets in everything from cigarettes to sportswear. So we need to look at everything with our eyes on the black market all the time. It's not an easy business. We're going to have to involve everybody in this discussion so that we come across with something that is doable, with something that is simple yet enforceable.
Just to bring in quickly, the article highlighted that there are other products associated with the plant, such as hemp, which offer great commercial opportunities. I mean, what are your thoughts on products like hemp?
It's been going round in circles for 2 generations. It's absolutely ridiculous that just because it looks like dacha, it is dacha. And so if you put a field of hemp in the Western Cape, you have to put a 2-meter fence with electricity all the way around it in case somebody steals it because they perceive that it's something that it's not. So I have no idea why in this country with this amount of space and this amount of sunshine and this amount of unemployment that we haven't led the world in hemp production. We prefer to call it industrial cannabis. Hemp as a word it's a bit of a misnomer. Hemp, I can go into the etymology of the word.
So what is the problem there? Is it a misconception of the product itself?
It's a misconception, and the age-old adage is, well, we can't police it because we won't know whether it's hemp or not unless we put it through a laboratory test to prove that there's no mind-altering substances within it, because of course that's the crux of the whole matter. It's this stoned business.
Myrtle, how big is this? Do you know how big this industry is at the moment? It's untapped. You're still busy with a court case, and what other opportunities are there outside of, say, medical use?
Well, we've touched on the industrial cannabis, and the industrial cannabis has got dozens and dozens of applications, from biofuel to obviously the fiber that everybody knows about, cosmetics, also building applications. The hemp house in Cape Town that was built by Hemporium, and Tony Budden is quite famous now. And I must just add that the Department of Health, strangely enough, is making some permits available to South Africans. You can go through quite a lengthy process, and then you are allowed to grow 2 hectares of industrial cannabis. So as far as the applications are concerned, with the industrial cannabis, they're absolutely vast. When it comes to other uses, medical uses, or uses for recreation, as people like to call it, we estimated that there is probably 20 million cannabis users in South Africa. And this is everybody from your top executives down to your person on the street. So that in itself is, it would be too long for me to describe all the potential of all the businesses surrounding that.
So if we take it back to the medical side of things, there's already an international company asking to do research locally into medical marijuana. Are we sitting on our laurels and missing out on potential massive income opportunities because of that?
Just a comment about the international company. We will be extremely disappointed if that particular company gets the first medical cannabis trial accepted in South Africa, because the fact of the matter is that there's a very, very big underground movement in cannabis in South Africa. And within that movement is all the experts that you need. So that's my first comment, sorry.
Merton, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it at that for today. Thank you so much for making the time to come and join us and to give us a bit more insight with regards to the legalization of cannabis. That was Jules Stobbs at Fields of Green for All, and Myrtle Clark, who's the Managing Director of Fields of Green for All. Our time now for us to pay the bills. We'll be back right after this break. Welcome back to Finweek Money Matters. While becoming an entrepreneur can be a soul-destroying endeavor, raising capital, coming to terms with the basics of doing business, understanding the business cycles, providing good customer services, and managing cash flow while still putting food on the table, it can all be very overwhelming. While making mistakes is a part of the entrepreneur learning curve, but some mistakes are universal. In this segment, we'll be discussing the mistakes entrepreneurs make before starting a business, the most common mistakes in the first year of doing business, and mistakes more established entrepreneurs often make. Joining us here on the desk is Ravi Govender, who's the head of small business enterprises at Standard Bank, and Peter Scholes, who's the master franchisor of Action Coach. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. Ravi, let's start with you. Sure. What stands out to you as being the most common mistake that you see with business owners? Let's start in the first year, just as people are getting started.
I think in the first year or before the first year, amazing ideas, but no business plan to support it, no financial acumen, misreading your markets become an issue. So how do you match passion versus the actually making money? And that's the biggest mistake that people make. Research, research, research. Understand your market, understand your product, understand your price, and understand your pitch.
So you're saying often the ideas are there, there's just no financial literacy to back them up?
Absolutely. I see entrepreneurs by default, they manage their business by their default competency. And if your default competency is marketing and lack of financials, you're certainly in the failure. And we don't complement those skills often.
So how do you compensate for that? If you don't know as a startup entrepreneur how to put together a business plan, what are the main things that you should be looking at in a business plan?
I think as entrepreneurs, you have to complement those brilliant ideas with complementary skills. Go and research, speak to people that have done business plans before, speak to other business owners, speak to formal institutions that can coach you in those business plans. At the end of the day, don't outsource your business plans, write it yourself so that you understand your numbers.
Peter?
Yeah, I think Ravi's correct. I mean, I think that besides the planning and getting the plans right in your particular business and getting that right, I just want to add to that. Number one is that what I often see people is writing the plan, but then the plan goes into file 12, and they never in actual fact stick to the plan.
Sure.
So the big issue for me is around making sure that as you start, is you've got somebody holding you accountable for that. The second point I want to pick up is, I find that quite often business owners identify one product or one product segment to go into, They don't actually understand what their unique selling proposition is. So therefore, price competitiveness becomes an issue, and so it's margin decline is one thing. And the third point I want to pick up is that I also see too many business owners going into business where 50% or more of their revenue is coming from one customer source. And the moment that customer source turns off or switches off from your customer range, you haven't got a business. And in fact, my view is that if you've got 50% of your business coming from one source, you actually don't have a business.
So, Peter, before you start your business, before you quit your job and make a dramatic exit of, not working for the man anymore, what should you have in place?
Well, we were talking about it early on. Said number one is cash flow. There's an old adage that it takes you twice as long and twice the amount of money to in actual fact get your business up and running. So that's critical. Don't underestimate the amount of time and money it takes to get your business up and running.
So how do you walk that fine line between being too stuck to one idea and not changing along the way, and persisting with an idea until you've really worked out whether it will work or not? How do you tell which route to go?
I think it's being very clear about what the product is that you want to offer out there, and secondly is to go and understand which market segment you want to go into. So there might be one great product you want to put onto the market, but look a little bit beyond that, and to see which market segment do I want to go and offer in on, and to what extent can I leverage other products off the key product I'm driving at the moment, and so therefore have ancillary product ranges or ancillary markets that I can get into.
Ravi, we've been talking about the mistakes that we make the first time we go into business. If you're 5 years or 10 years in, do people tend to make the same mistakes?
I think we are creatures of habits. To my earlier point, I'm very passionate about the inability for entrepreneurs to reinvent themselves. So the very first thing that got them successful is the very, very first thing that will fail from that perspective. To my earlier point, if I'm a default competence marketer and I go and run my business and I have the inability to run operational excellence, finance excellence, so what happens is I fall short on the other competencies. Eventually your product becomes history, your customers becomes very frustrated with you, and your business fails from that point of view. The other thing that I'm very interested in is the ability to think big and act small. Too many entrepreneurs go too quick, too big. And it has very, very unintended consequences in terms of cash flow planning, funding that business, and eventually they find themselves in the business as opposed to on the business. So how do you manage from the curves of cradle to grave? And how do you